Okay, we have got hundreds of people on the line, so I'm going to make a start. Welcome to this Moneybox webinar. My name is Byrnes. I'm the head of personal finance here, and I'll be hosting the session this evening. Thank you everybody for joining. Tuesdays in January are a very competitive slot, so we are delighted to see thousands of people register for this evening's session, and already hundreds on the line. The most asked question that we got in advance was, will the session be recorded? Yes, it will, and you will get a copy of the recording as long as I have remembered to press record, which I have, which is good. We're aiming for about 30 minutes this evening, and we'll go through in a minute what we're going to do with that time. But please do feel free to use the live Q&A box that you should see on your screen. If you've got any questions as we go through anything, there is a slot at the end to answer some live questions that we might get while we're on the line. What we're going to do in the meantime, first of all, we're going to talk about goal setting and what a good goal looks like. There's a lot of New Year's resolutions, obviously, at this time of year, a lot of them financial related. So that's going to be the main theme of this evening. We're going to chat through some common financial goals in case anybody is in need of inspiration. If you don't have any already, hopefully you'll leave this session with a few more. We'll have a chat about how to make your goals last beyond January, because financial or otherwise, that is always a challenge, and give yourself the best chance of success when it comes to financial resolutions. Then we'll talk about some really solid building blocks of good personal finance, things that are good year round. And then we'll finish off by going through some of the pre-submitted questions. And also, please feel free to use the Q&A function, as I mentioned in Zoom, to submit any more questions that come to mind. I am obliged to remind everyone that Moneybox does not offer personal financial advice. You should make your own personal finance and investing decisions. And even though we're not really talking about investing specifically this evening, investing is for the long term, and the value of investments can go up and down. So I'm just going to double check everyone can hear me, which seems to be going fine, and we will kick off. Okay. Why do we set goals? Why do we set resolutions? We set goals because they help us navigate where we're going. I kind of equate it to like setting a destination in a sat nav before you go on a journey. You don't just start driving and say, oh, hopefully one day I'd like to end up in Scotland or Cornwall for my holidays. We put in a specific destination and the technology tells us how long it's going to take and how we're going to get there. And we should really treat our financial goals the same, but we don't actually in practice. As we come into a new year, many people have a kind of semi-objective, oh, I'd like to be better with money, I'd like to sort out my finances. But one of the few predictions that I will make is that those resolutions aren't going to last very long. They're not specific, they can't be measured, there's no time frame involved, so they're very easy to give up on. We can see in the example that's on your screen here, many people have the ambition to buy a house someday. Many thousands, hundreds of thousands of Moneybox customers are with us for that reason. But it's really, really important to make that goal specific in order to bring it to reality. So changing it to something like, I will save a £12,000 deposit for my first home in the next 4 years is a vital step if you want to bring these goals into fruition. You can then attack that goal in two ways. You can either say, this is my time horizon, this is when I want to buy the house, and this is the deposit that I'm aiming for. How much do I need to save per month in order to make that happen? Is that realistic for me? Is that realistic for my finances? Or you can go at it the other way, and you can add up all of your incomings and outgoings, and you can figure out how much you can save per month realistically. And then you can work out whether it's realistic to hit that goal within that time frame. Either route makes the goal specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bound. So if you have goals for this year and you're aiming for things financially, one bit of homework from this evening is to make sure that they are smart. This will infinitely increase your chances of hitting these goals and sticking with your financial resolutions. Thinking more generally, outside of kind of finances, what are some common goals that we see around this time of year, and how will we make these more specific and actionable? So if you were trying to hit some of the resolutions on the screen, you would do things like you would join a running club or you would join a gym. You'd start booking lessons for cooking or guitar if you wanted to learn those. If you wanted to plan a big holiday, you'd start researching your trip, or you'd buy a guidebook. Or if you wanted to do some volunteer work, you'd contact an organization and start going through that process. What do all of those have in common? Well, they require consistent effort. And it's the same with financial resolutions. You often get the sense when you're speaking to people that they feel financial resolutions are different. They should be a one and done situation, and you should do them and not really have to think about them again. And some are, and we'll come on to some in a minute, that are just really easy to tick off and get done. But most of them and your overall financial picture takes consistent effort, similar to the other types of goals. I really believe you should be carving out around about 30 minutes a week to work on your financial goals, whatever they might be. For me, it's as simple as making myself a coffee on a Sunday morning and setting the time for 30 minutes and working towards a goal. It can be as simple as reading an article if you want. If your goal is to buy a house, reading an article on that process and trying to demystify some of the terms involved is an incredibly useful way to spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes. But all of these goals, be it financial or otherwise, they all take consistent effort and they all require consistent steps in order to bring them to fruition. If you've turned up this evening with some financial goals, that's great. As I say, your homework is to make sure that they are specific and that you have a time frame that you want to achieve them in. If you're in need of some inspiration, here are some of the common goals that we see amongst Moneybox customers. The first two are in order of priority. They are the most important ones. If you have those as goals, they should be top of your list. We'll come on to why that is and why they're so important a bit later on. The third goal, building up a house deposit, it's by far the most common one that we see with Moneybox customers. We have hundreds of thousands of people with us all saving for this goal. And the great thing that we've seen is that we haven't seen that much evidence of people putting off this goal or getting demoralized after some of the volatility that we saw on the mortgage market in the last 6 months of 2022. And that's great, because you shouldn't be put off or demoralized. Buying a house is still a very, very realistic goal, despite some of the headlines that we see in newspapers. And there's still some really great tools out there to help you, like the Lifetime ISA or Moneybox Mortgage Broker Team, for example, still helping hundreds of customers per month purchase a house. I sit near that team, so maybe I'm biased, but they are awesome. Then we come on to the saving and investing goals. Many Moneybox customers are saving towards a specific thing, like a wedding or a holiday, but others are simply saving and investing to try and make their money grow over the medium to long term. Another thing that's causing a lot of headlines at the moment is inflation. And with prices rising at the rate that they are, it's never been more important to focus on the real value of your savings. What do I mean by real value? Well, if your savings account is giving you a 3% return, and it should be, but prices are rising by 10% a year, the real value of your savings is decreasing by 7%. And this is a really new problem for us in the UK. Inflation has not been a problem for most of us for the last 10 or 15 years. Savings accounts also correspondingly haven't been offering much return. They are now, which is great, but if inflation is outstripping the savings, then the real value of your savings is decreasing. If your goals are in the next 5 years, unfortunately, there's not an awful lot you can do about that. You just kind of have to suck it up. If your goals are further out than that, then you do need to consider investing or trying to keep pace with inflation, because historically, saving into cash accounts has not done that. It has sent you backwards after inflation has been factored in. A non-saving and investing goal, but a very common one nonetheless, is increasing your income. This can be from things like salary negotiation, side hustles, anything like that. This is also a really important one to make sure that is specific, measurable, realistic, and time-bound. Have a measurable plan to achieve this goal. For example, I'm going to take a course to get this skill, which makes me more valuable to my employer, or it allows me to set up a side business within the next 6, 9, or 12 months. We often focus on our expenditure, our investing, our pensions, which is great. Don't overlook your ability to attempt to try and increase your income. Easier said than done, I know, but it is a goal that we see amongst Moneybox customers quite a lot. Last but not least is retirement, a really easy one to forget about and put on the long finger, especially in a cost of living crisis. But the more you delay dealing with it, the more daunting it becomes. And there are things that you can do to improve your retirement prospects without paying money out of your pocket. More on that in a second. Just going to see if we've got questions coming through, which we do, which is awesome. Please keep them coming through. And I'm just going to have a quick drink. Excellent. Pensions. Really, really common goal. A lot of people have pension statements somewhere, buried in a drawer, in their emails, and it's just the last thing that we decide to sort out. If you have it on your resolution list, great. If you don't, it probably should be on there. There's usually something that all of us can do to bring our retirement goals closer to fruition, or just sort out the relentless kind of admin that comes with pensions. Good news is, again, Moneybox here to help on this one. If we take this case study though, if we take Alice, she's 29, she earns about 35,000 per year, and let's say her New Year's resolution is to sort out her pension. She works full-time, 2 previous jobs. She remembers having a conversation about pensions when she started her current job, but she doesn't remember the details of it. It was in the first week of joining. No one ever remembers the conversations that we have that week. And especially when it comes to something as important as pensions, we tend to have that conversation and then forget about it. For her old pensions, she has paperwork and emails, but she hasn't sorted them out. It's on her to-do list for this year. So there's really only 2 steps that she needs to do to get more pension confident and to achieve this goal. The first one is about her current pension. So she should contact her current employer's HR team and basically try and redo that conversation that she had in the first week of joining, but now that she's got more headspace and not trying to take in everything that you need when you start a job. So she should be trying to find out her current contributions. How much is she paying in? How much is her employer paying in? And also what her investment options are. If she has that information, she's much better off than when she started. When it comes to her old pensions, this is step 2. She needs to contact her old employers or their pension schemes and try and get an up-to-date valuation of her old pensions. She may well just be able to log into the portal where her pensions are held and get an up-to-date valuation that way. Some way of just finding out where those old pensions are, how much she's got in them, and again, ideally the kind of investment options. Her ideal endpoint should be that she's contributing somewhere around 8% of her salary into her pension, and her employer contributes about 6%. That's a very common employer contribution arrangement. She knows where her old pensions are, and if she likes, she consolidates them. The really important thing with old pensions is not to lose track of them. We see so many stats of billions and billions and billions of pounds in lost pensions every year. People losing the paperwork, forgetting they had pensions with old jobs, not realizing they had pensions with old jobs, and there are billions of pounds, as I say, left on the table for people that lose their old pensions. So incredibly important to keep track of them and know where your money is. The last endpoint that she should be aiming for, she's 29 now. If she wants to set a target for herself, she should be aiming to have 1.5 times her salary saved into her pension by 35. So she's on 35K now. Really good target is somewhere around 50K to have in her pension by 35. If you're 35 now or over and don't have this, don't panic. I am in that exact situation. It's a target to aim for. It's a stretching target to aim for, but people often wonder, how much should I be saving? Am I on track? There are these rules of thumb that you can aim for to make sure that you are broadly on track for your retirement and pension goals. The really important thing to notice about this endpoint, it doesn't take any money from Alice's pocket right now. So she's not making extra contributions into her pension. She's not paying more into private pensions. She's just sorting out her existing ones and understanding what's going on with her current pensions. That's incredibly important in a cost of living crisis. We know it's very difficult at the moment to contribute new money towards long-term goals, for example. We all have short-term pressures at the moment. So this is something that everybody can do, sort out your old pensions that doesn't require any money from your pocket right now. Okay, one way to make sure that you stick with your goals is to form healthy habits around them. Achievements of goals is really nothing but a series of interconnected steps carried out in a row. I mentioned earlier you should be setting aside around about 30 minutes a week to work on your financial goals. If you don't have any financial goals right now, then you probably should after this evening. Hopefully you will. But here are some healthy habits that I try and go through consistently on a weekly, monthly, 6-monthly, and an annual basis. So on a weekly basis, again, people ask me sometimes, what's the first step that I can take? What's the easiest thing that I can do with my finances? And that is to see what is coming in and out of your account. So weekly basis, sit down with your account, make sure that you recognize all of the transactions going in and out. There's nothing untoward going on with your accounts. Often I do this and I see something that I've meant to return or ordered online, or there's been something mistaken gone through, and I can find a way to rectify that. You can also compare your spending with your budget. If you've set a budget in advance, you can see how close to that you are. And this is somewhere on a weekly basis. If you don't have anything immediate to tick off on your financial goals, you can just spend the time reading around mortgages, pensions, saving, investing. Turn it into a habit. On a monthly basis, you should be looking, if possible, to pay off your credit cards in full. Again, quite a big challenge. We'll come on to why that's important in a minute. You should be paying yourself first, whether that comes to your savings, investing, pension contributions, all of that sort of stuff in an ideal world should come out when you get paid before you have a chance to spend it. So that's what we talk about when we say paying yourself first. Then on a 6-monthly basis, you should be reviewing your progress towards your goals. So June of this year, you should be looking back, and hopefully you're still making progress if you're following these healthy financial habits. And if you've got some sort of financial spreadsheet or you're keeping track of those old pensions, you should update the values and make sure that you know where everything is at a given time from a financial perspective. On an annual basis then, really useful to review those financial goals. So again, when January kind of comes around, it's a good time to say, did I hit them? Should I have new goals for the new year? But annually, at least, you should be looking at those financial goals. And again, either on a manual basis or most likely people use kind of apps or spreadsheets to track it now. Review what you actually spent versus what you budgeted to spend. I would again make a prediction that if you add up everything that you actually spend, in some areas you'll be spending far more than you think, in some areas you'll be spending far less than you think. Very difficult to set a budget for the new year if you don't know what's actually coming in and out of your account. So those are some healthy habits to get into on a weekly, monthly, 6-monthly, or annual basis. Perfect. So I mentioned there about paying off your credit cards in full. That's the ideal situation that we want to get into, but obviously not the situation that we always find ourselves in. So we're going to get on to some building blocks of really good personal finances. And the first building block is all about debt, and it's about what we call problem debt. Bad debt is things like credit cards or personal loans where you have an interest rate, generally speaking, above 5%. That's the kind of threshold between bad debt and good debt, and we'll come on to the good debt in a second. But if you do have these this debt where you're paying more than 5% in interest, this should be priority number one. This is the building block of all of the other things that we talk about when we talk about saving, investing, pensions, all that sort of stuff. They are all built on top of these building blocks. And number one priority should be to get rid or have a plan to get rid of the problem debt if you possibly can do. Good debt does exist. For the last decade, mortgages in the UK has been what we would say good debt. Rates have been so low, the borrowing has been pretty inexpensive. You could reasonably borrow a mortgage at 2% and potentially get a 6% return on stocks and shares, for example, which is a pretty good trade. So paying down mortgage debt hasn't been that much of a priority for the last decade in the UK. That picture is changing slightly. It's not clear to me. I wouldn't be making predictions on what interest rates are going to do in the UK, and I'm not going to make predictions on what investing returns are going to do, certainly over the short term. So if you have a question of, should I be paying off my mortgage or should I be investing? It's a little bit of a coin flip at the moment. It comes down to your personal preference, and there's no real right or wrong answer. It's whatever you're most comfortable with when it comes to things like mortgages. Again, when it comes to things like credit cards or loans, interest rates above 5%, they should be the priority to pay off. That is building block number one. Building block number two is an emergency fund. I'm not going to dwell too much on why we need an emergency fund. I think we all know an emergency fund is a sensible idea. You don't want your heating to break down in the middle of the winter and not be able to repair it. You don't want unexpected medical bills, tax bills. It's always sensible to have some savings set aside that you hope you never have to use. It sounds really simple, but very few people actually do this one very, very accurately. When you speak with customers, you often hear things like, oh, I will just spend on my credit card for emergencies. I'll borrow off a family member. I will have, on the other side of things, they'll say, yes, I've got $5,000 put away for emergencies, or I've got investments, I'll just sell them down if an emergency occurs. None of these are really the kind of textbook definition of an emergency fund and really how you should do it if you're setting up your finances properly. This is an area where you can be exact. You should have 3 to 6 months worth of expenditure put aside and ring fenced for emergencies. So your expenditure, your basic needs, things like your mortgage or your rent, your utilities, how much you would spend on food, the minimum that you would need to survive on a monthly basis multiplied by 3 or 6. You can get down to a pound amount of exactly how much you should have in your emergency fund. If you don't know how much you spend, or you can't be bothered to work out how much you spend, you can just take your income and multiply that by 3 or 6. That's also fine. You'll be a little bit higher probably than your expenditure. That's not the end of the world. Any less than that, you are really risking an emergency situation, putting you into an awful position and really setting you back towards your other financial goals. If you've got much more than 6 months, you're potentially risking having too much in cash and inflation doing what inflation does, as we discussed, and destroying that real value of your savings. There is reasons to have more in cash. So if you are self-employed, for example, or if you've got young children, dependents, that's a good reason to have a potentially bigger emergency fund than 6 months, or anything that you know you're going to spend within the next 2 years, kind of big, what we would say, capital purchases. So a house deposit you're going to use in the next 2 or 3 years, that should be kept in cash. A wedding fund, a holiday fund, anything like that, those should be kept in cash. For your true emergency fund, 3 to 6 months worth of expenditure put aside and ring fenced for those emergencies. Where to keep it? Again, very simple. It should be kept in cash and instantly accessible. It should not be invested. It should not be in a notice account. It should be immediately accessible. You can shop around now for the best instant access rate, but always make sure to keep it instant access and then forget about it. The hopes with this account is that you never have to use it. That's building block number 2, and the 2 of those are the most important. If you didn't have financial goals coming into this session, then those should be the 2 that you take away: paying off problem debt, setting up an emergency fund. So we've got 2 really solid building blocks in place now. We're getting on to the more medium or potentially long-term goals. So a short-term goal is anything really within the next 3 years. Again, as I said, house deposit, wedding fund, holiday savings, put it in a cash account somewhere and forget about it. Don't even think about investing it. When markets are going well, you might have a fear of missing out about this fund, not be getting the return that you want, the boost that you could be getting on your short-term goals if you invested money for the short term. But we're talking about building financial resilience here and not being set back when things get tricky and markets get difficult. In a year like 2022, which is a very difficult investing year, you don't want to have the money set aside for short-term goals invested into the stock market. You should be thinking about minimum 5 years when you're talking about investing, and that's where your kind of medium to long-term goals come in. For your short-term goals, this is where you can use things like notice accounts, 1-year fixed rates, whatever gets you the best interest rates and matches up to that time horizon of your goals. So if you're getting married in a couple of years, you can put that money aside and try and get the best kind of rate possible. Long-term goals, this is anything over 10 years, and really it jumps down to things like retirement. And this is where you can start investing, putting money well aside for the long term. But we're going to do separate webinars on investing and retirement later in the year. So those are the two solid building blocks, and then how we talk about setting goals, short, medium, and long term. So we're going to move on to the Q&A session section of the evening, and we're coming towards the conclusion now. But a couple of pre-submitted questions that I think are applicable probably to a wider audience. One was from Ivy and said, if you have limited money to save, is it smarter to save 50-50 between investments and your savings accounts, or should the split be more favored away from investing? So this depends on your goals, basically. If you've got limited money to save, you should probably be focused on one goal and one goal alone. As we discussed, primary goals should be paying down debt, building up an emergency fund. So if you've got limited money to save, it should be going towards those goals. If you've got those sorted, then you can be putting that limited amount that you've got to save towards your medium and long-term goals, like investing, like pensions, for example. So limited money to save, you should probably direct it, pick one goal and direct your funds towards that. Second pre-submitted question that we'll go through was from Sabrina and said, I've read a lot of conflicting information about saving while also clearing debt at the same time. What are your thoughts? Should all debt be cleared before you begin saving, or is it okay to do both at the same time? Similar answer on this one. Again, if you've got that high interest debt, that should be your number one priority. The reason for that is credit cards typically charge 20-25% interest, and that is the interest that you're avoiding paying when you pay down that credit card. So if you're trying to do two things at once in terms of paying off debt and saving and investing, one side of that with the paying off debt, you effectively get a 20-25% return by paying off that debt and not paying that interest to the credit card company. On the other side of it, you're trying to save and invest. You're not going to get a 25% return, certainly in the short term when it comes to saving and investing. So you should really be prioritizing paying off the debt first, because that's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. Once you've done that, move on to emergency fund, then move on to more medium term investing goals. So those were the pre-submitted questions. I see we've got about 60 questions on the line. I am going to give our compliance team a heart attack by trying to answer a couple of these live, but anybody that we don't get to live online, we will come back to you individually over the course of the next couple of days. So I see a question from Laura saying, is it a good idea to consolidate the pensions that you have into one? One of the benefits of doing this is that you keep track of those pensions, so you know where they all are at one time. As I mentioned, there's a huge amount of pensions that are lost on an annual basis, and that's the number one thing that we're trying to avoid. So consolidating your pensions obviously helps you avoid losing them. It also helps you keep an eye on things like your investing options. It helps you keep an eye on your fees, and it helps you keep them all in one place. So there's quite a lot of benefits to consolidation, but you should check where your pensions are at the moment and see if you're getting a particularly good deal there. And then you should be making your own choice about whether to consolidate them or not. But as I say, the benefits are, you know where they are at all times, you know how much you're paying, you know what you're invested in. One more live question I can see from Laura. Are 0% credit card deals advisable? They are advisable when you are paying off your debt. So if you're paying any credit card interest, you should be looking at potentially switching over to 0% credit card deals while you're focused on paying down that debt. So they're a good place to consolidate debt while you pay it down. Make sure that you're not paying any interest to credit card companies while you have that as your priority goal. Okay. I'll give our compliance team a break now and stop answering live questions. That's everything for this evening. We really want your feedback. Please do get in touch with us in the app, or my email is on the screen if you found this session useful. If you found it completely useless and was not what you were expecting, please tell us that as well. We've not been running these webinars for a particularly long time, so we would like to improve them. We would like to know what topics you want to cover in future. We plan to make them a relatively regular habit, but only if they are useful to our customers. As I said, we will be responding to everybody that has asked a question live individually over the course of the next 2 or 3 days. Hopefully we'll try. There's a lot of questions that have come in, but we will try and come back to you by the end of this week. Other than that, thank you very much for joining. As I say, my email address is there on the screen, so please feel free to ask me any future questions or give me that feedback that we really would like from you. But thank you for giving up your evening. I'll stop talking now and let you get back on and head towards those financial goals. Thank you very much.